Hello everyone, it's time for lecture number 7 in the Introduction to Wiccan Theology lecture series. Today's lecture is going to be on magic and the psychic arts, divination, and so on. I'll be running through various theoretical and practical work dealing with Aliester, Crowley, and the Ordo Templi Orientis and some of their ideas, as well as some different ideas, different types of magical ritual and rituals connecting one to deities. Well, without further ado, I'll just get started. Every religion has some way of appealing to the powers that be for assistance. Magic, intercessionary prayer, blessings, confessions, absolution, the transmutation, and other appeals to the powers that be, and non-rational elements. But Wicca gives this aspect quite a bit more emphasis, and we're more direct about it than some other religions. Although earlier sociology of religion, Durkheim for a prominent example, and also anthropology, made a sharp distinction between magic and the more cool, rational appeals to the supernatural, basically those that mainstream Protestant Christian groups that they thought well of used. The unstated norm, of course, for study of religion is mainstream Protestant Christian groups. In fact, these things are on a continuum. Stark and Bainbridge, Rodney Stark and William Bainbridge, in their highly influential and for very good reasons, a theory of religion, distinguish between the general rewards offered by religion and the specific rewards that people who consult magicians are looking for, to argue that there can be no church of magic. Their points basically come down to the problem of the frequent failure of magic to produce its results, and the loss of authority by religious specialists who promise specific relief from specific ills, end quote, because magicians cannot require others to engage in long-term stable patterns of exchange, and in the absence of long-term stable patterns of exchange, an organization composed of magicians and a committed laity cannot be sustained. In other words, if magicians can't get regular donations from their followers, and so their organizations tend to collapse. When Stark and Roger Finke revisited this theory in the year 2000 in their book Acts of Faith, they dealt with magic and other forms of appeal to the powers that be in a somewhat more sophisticated fashion, but came to much the same conclusion in their formulation. Magic is limited to impersonal conceptions of the supernatural, and so the magical use of something like a St. Christopher's medal for protection by a Catholic is not magic because it indirectly appeals to a deity. I must say, much though I admire Stark's work in general, there is a real issue of special pleading for Christianity and Christian concepts in it. So, Wicca is in the continuum of belief and practice in such things as divination, faith healing, the value of ecstatic experience, trance, and meditative practices, techniques to focus the will towards an effective functioning in the world. We're a little bit further over towards the magical end than groups like Pentecostal Christianity or Christian Science. I'll go back to the great pragmatist William James in his Varieties of Religious Experience to say, one may say truly, I think, that personal religious experience has its root and center in mystical states of consciousness, and argue that the techniques of magic as practiced in Wicca are methods to awaken the mystical connection and consciousness, not purely operant magic, although there is some of that, which is intended to solve a particular problem, but also high magic, which connects us to the larger universe of meaning and awareness and non-obvious connections amongst people and the world around us. Now, there are 8 specific magical techniques that Gerald Gardner and the first Wiccan covens used to a greater or lesser extent. Some are widely practiced now, others are not, and practitioners have added ideas from elsewhere. Wiccan clergy generally will undergo training in the use of each of these techniques. And they're all discussed in my book, The Uses of Ecstasy, so I won't go into them in detail today. 1. Meditation or concentration. Chants, spells, and invocations. The projection of the astral body. Trance, incense, drugs and wine. Dancing. Blood control, use of the cords. The scourge. The scourge is a cat of 9 tails, generally with tails made of a braided embroidery thread. It's a symbolic whip. And the Great Rite. The Great Rite is the central mystery of Wicca, as well as a technique for using and raising energy, and I dealt with it in some detail in the last lecture. The best general source of Wiccan ideas about magic, I'd have to say, is the work of Aliester Crowley. The essay Magic in Theory and Practice is very useful, and I will cite it liberally hereafter. In Crowley's view, magic is not an escape from reality, but the awakening of a different set of faculties to deal with it. A greater awareness of the energy moving underneath appearances, energy which is subject to being shaped and directed by the well-honed will of the magician. In principle, any person could access these energies and learn to move and shape them. The process of learning what the energies are and coming to facility in moving and shaping them involves a great number of exercises, rituals, and meditative practices, all aimed at strengthening and honing the will of the magician. In his definition, quote, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Quote, he explains that any action whatever, even such mundane and apparently non-metaphysical ones as sitting down at a keyboard and typing out the lecture notes for a class, can be seen as magical acts if they fulfill the will of the magician. Quote, as it is my will to inform the world of certain facts within my knowledge, I therefore take magical weapons, pen, ink, and paper. I write incantations, these sentences, in the magical language, i.e., that which is understood by the people I wish to instruct. I call forth spirits, such as printers, publishers, booksellers, and so forth, and constrain them to convey my message to those people. The composition and distribution of this book is thus an act of magic by which I cause changes to take place in accordance with my will, as Crowley says. He sets forward various follow-up postulates to support the development of magical technique. I encourage you to read his book to get the details of these. Any required change may be effected by the application of the proper kind and degree of force in the proper manner through the proper medium to the proper object. Every change has its own conditions. In the present state of our knowledge and power, some changes are not possible in practice. It is theoretically possible to cause any object, any change of which that object is capable by nature, and the conditions are covered by the above postulate. There's a number of these postulates, and I will refrain from reciting all of them. Every intentional act is a magical act. Every successful act is conformed to this postulate. The first requirement for causing any change is through qualitative and quantitative understanding of the conditions. The second requisite is the practical ability to set in motion the necessary forces. Every man and every woman is a star, that is to say, every human being is intrinsically an independent individual with their own proper character and proper motion. Every woman and every man has a course, depending partly on the self and partly on the environment, which is natural and necessary for each. Anyone who is forced from their own course, either through not understanding themselves or through external opposition, comes into conflict with the order of the universe and suffers accordingly. A person whose conscious will is at odds with their true will is wasting their strength. They cannot hope to influence their environment efficiently. The concept of true will here is that the purpose and meaning of one's life is possible for one to understand, and that purpose and meaning is the true will. That is the direction that your life naturally wishes to take you in. A person who is doing their true will has the inertia of the universe to assist them. Nature is a continuous phenomenon, although we do not know in all cases how things are connected. Every person is more or less aware that our individuality comprises several orders of existence, even when we maintain that subtler principles are merely symptomatic of changes in our physical vehicle. A similar order may be assumed to extend through nature. Every force in the universe is capable of being transformed into any other kind of force by using suitable means. There is thus an inexhaustible supply of any particular kind of force that we might need. And so on. Like I say, read Crowley. Yes, everyone has an indefensible right to be what they are. Everyone has a right, the right of self-preservation, to fulfill themselves to the utmost. And everyone has the right to fulfill their own will without being afraid that it may interfere with that of others. For if one is in one's proper place, it is the fault of others if they interfere with you. Crowley and the ceremonial magic which he espouses is centered on the individual will and personal self-determination, to the point sometimes of arrogance and selfishness. Although the general principles of strong and focused will and purpose are accepted in Wicca, we are much more community-oriented and cooperative in our approach. We believe that it is the creative exchange of energy between people and amongst the members of groups which empowers all of us and creates effective change in the world in accordance with our will, not the acts of isolated heroic individuals. Another very valuable work is Isaac Bonewitz's book, Real Magic, which is adapted from an interdisciplinary BA degree from the University of California. Well, back in the 60s, the kind of things they were able to do. He discusses the laws of magic and a fine discussion of how and why magic might work, and how the various laws of magic work together. The law of association, something that reminds you of something, can connect you to that thing. The law of contagion, something that has been in contact with something else, continues to be in contact with it, even though they are physically separated. Words of power, and of course names of power. Personification of the divine or of the powers of nature, with evocation and invocation as separate ways of bringing the divine into our lives and our experiences. Evocation bringing it up from inside of us, invocation bringing it in from outside of us. Knowledge and self-knowledge. Polarity. The way that the exchange of energy between things that appear to be different creates a new thing, a synthesis, which is the way that power moves. An excellent book, and I think an essential read, even now, many years later. It was published in 1971. Although the ceremonial magical current exemplified by Aliester Crowley and the Ordo Templi Orientis, and its predecessor, the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was led by MacGregor Mather and Miona Mathers, it provides a great deal of the theology of magic use and the formation of our foundation rituals of Wicca. Some other quite different currents entered in from early on. And from this amalgam of folk magic practices, high magic ceremony, and bits and pieces drawn from here and there, Wiccans tend to develop individual magical practices. Popular magical techniques and practices like Reiki, which is a recently developed practice, direct energy work, divination, reading tarot, astrology, runes, tossing the I Ching, the table of Ifa, which last two are adopted non-European techniques, reading omens, dream analysis, trance, necromancy, talking to dead relatives through the Ouija or in other ways. A lot of magic is performed through ritual in conjunction with other things, because Wicca is experiential and centered on ritual. So I'll just briefly discuss types of rituals. Rites of exchange and communion. Excuse me, I talked about these before when dealing with connecting with your matron and patron deity. These are rituals done to celebrate and affirm the relationship that an individual or group has with their matron or patron deity. So they're rites of praise and celebration, which include often an element of prayer, offerings, or supplication as well. They often also include a restatement of agreements which the gods made with the people in the ritual and the commitments that the people have made to the gods. They may include apologies from the people for not upholding their part of the bargain or appeals to the gods to do their part. There's solitary rituals of exchanging communion can be performed to honor your matron and patron, and if there's a prayer that's recently been answered, a goddess or god to whom you prayed. The best ritual for the enhancement and celebration of personal power and efficacy, which I know, that explicitly recognizes the divine connection of each individual, is the Rite of the Bornless One, which is adapted by Aliester Crowley from a Golden Dawn original. I strongly recommend that people at some point look it up. It's called Liber Samek, and perform it. I will give a summary and a highly abbreviated version below. Begin by telling yourself that there is a part of yourself that was not born with your body, a spirit or a soul that is immortal and which is like a goddess or a god, or a small fragment of the universal force and the all. This part of yourself can be said, on the old magical principle that as above, so below, to be the same as this infinite power of existence. As the great creative force is infinite, any fragment of it is also infinite. The Bornless One reminds you of this power and connection and encourages you to spread your ego and yourself out to include this tremendous capacity. It is very much about demolishing false humbleness and embracing your true strength. You may perform this ritual solo or with a partner or several friends who are all in tune with your purpose. Now, on to rites of affliction. These are rituals that to deal with healing in the troubles of life. Healing can be of the mind, body, or circumstances. So, health concerns, financial issues, unemployment, legal issues like injustice, court cases, jail, being the victim of a crime, and larger issues facing the entire community like drought, economic collapse, war, or other issues are all covered by this type of ritual. These are typically rituals of magic rather than purely worship, and they are not rites of celebration. You can also think of them as rites about balance, restoring the balance to things. To quote Karl Marx, religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the sentiment of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. Rites of affliction are best done by those who are genuinely afflicted, the poor, the ill, those who are unjustly treated, suppressed and oppressed groups. Solitary rites of this type are quite frequent to ask for personal help for job seeking, to bring housing issues and criminal law concerns to the gods. Offerings and prayers should be made to the goddesses and gods who are particularly interested in the issues that you're having. Hermes with the law, for example, Aphrodite with your sex life, Hera with marriage, if I stick to the Greek pantheon. Make appropriate offerings chosen after some research. The gods are not obliged to listen to you or to accept your offering, so give a very good argument as to why they should. You may ask for help for friends and others going through hard times, but that kind of ritual is best done with the other person there. This is not purely magic working. The magician manipulates the power of the universe with her personal power to cause change to occur in accordance with will, and you are supplicating. Part of what you're doing as well is building a better relationship with the deity that you're asking for a favor. The following ritual suggestion has to do with building solidarity and mutual trust rather than directly with a hardship, although it would fit into this general category. The greatest resource for each person is other people that trust them and on whom they can rely. Prepare yourself for a rite of confession. You'll be confessing something that you are very proud of, a substantial personal accomplishment of some sort that is also private. Think about what it is, write up several options, ground yourself, and look within. As in Alcoholics Anonymous Step 5, a very good general guide, by the way, is 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, and as history has shown, confession cannot be made in the abstract or in general. It must be concrete and specific confession to a real person, present in person, to have its effect. Consider and recruit a person that you trust, not your significant other, and not a person that was involved in the event that you're celebrating. As part of the ritual, swear them to secrecy. Prepare a ritual space, prepare yourself, bring your friend into the space and prepare them, and confess to them fully what it is that you are proud of, why you are proud of it, and in as much detail as you can. Their task is only to receive your confession, not to offer advice or praise or condemnation, but purely to be a witness. It's difficult to be a witness. It's also difficult to confess fully. Prepare yourself and receive their confession, either at the same time or at a different time. Remind each other that you have made a vow of secrecy and end the ritual however you wish. And of course, write up your feelings about this ritual as soon afterwards. You should always document the magical actions that you undertake in order to see what works most effectively for you. Rites of passage. These rituals transform individuals or groups from one status to another. They're rites of transformation, and of course many people see them as the model for all rituals. As a general rule, those rituals that change an individual's relationship to a larger group should be performed with that group as witnesses in some way, directly or through representatives. Other groups might or might not be invited or involved. For example, it's customary for a ritual elevating a third-degree high priestess or high priest to have guests invited from outside the group or tradition of the person being initiated for the public portion of the ritual. The mystery portion has to remain secret. As well, rituals emphasize the integration of the person into the community with their transformation seen as explicitly as social and community recognition. For example, through a public oath sworn by the new high priestess to the community that she is going to serve. By the nature of rites of passage, a person cannot initiate herself. However, she can mark passages in life that have already occurred and can acknowledge these changes. She might, for example, mark changes that have occurred by stating what she was like in a particular area of life before a substantial change, then what that change was or the event that precipitated the change, and then what she became as a result. She might mark this by taking a new name or making an object to put on her altar or in any number of other ways. I do discourage time-honored practices like circumcision or ritual scarification, although tattoos are now quite popular. Think about what the important changes in your life have been and what the likely important transitions that you will experience in the future will be. These don't have to be the same as anybody else's list of important transitions. Think in particular about the transitions that were not marked by ritual. Do they feel a little incomplete or unresolved? How does it feel that there are some loose threads that need to be tied off that are still hanging? Think about how you might want to settle any unfinished details of these transitions, what you would say goodbye to, and what you would like to welcome into your life in turn, and write and perform a ritual to do these things. If there are several unresolved bits, you may write several short rituals to deal with each in turn, or combine them into one larger ritual and link them together. Here's a suggested format. Cast a circle. State your reason for doing the ritual aloud. Set up the secure ritual space with a clear boundary. Start outside of the space and enter into it formally, opening and then closing a doorway on the way. When inside, state aloud what you need to do and why, and then do it. Acknowledge the things that you have said and done and why you have changed and what the result is. Thank the powers that be and acknowledge your new status by stating it aloud, assuming a new name or making a symbolic object to carry around with you or in some other way. Bless food and drink and make an offering, and then formally close down the ritual and empty out the space. Most rites of passage, with the exception of those that mark institutional accomplishments like initiation, ordination, graduation, oaths of office, or the like, is in the family or small group. Initiations and coming of age, births, naming, marriages, retirement, funerals and memorial ceremonies, and other family rituals can be performed there. Rituals must center on the person or persons undergoing the transformation. The significant actions must be directed at them, and they must emerge at the end to themselves perform some significant and powerful symbolic act to mark their arrival at the new status. As a general rule, we can say that the gods perform initiations as embodied in the priestess and priest, while the community of believers perform ordinations jointly with the gods. The rite of drawing down is important. The gods need to be invited to participate. There are usually ordeals and challenges to overcome, with the types of ordeals differing from group to group, but often include being blindfolded, which is very common, tied up, quite common, presented with symbolic objects connected with death, being flogged, fairly common, being verbally challenged and required to give an account of oneself. It's just very common. Mockery and insults, of course, are never used. Frequently, the initiant will be made vulnerable, nudity as usual in coven, and be led around through the dark to receive challenges. At the end, a new initiate will bless food and drink, be released from their bonds, and congratulated. In ordination, a symbolic transfer of power from the congregation to the ordinand is essential. She or he is given the authority by the congregation to act on their behalf, so the congregation will do a spiral dance around them, or a cone of power, or a call and response blessing, or in some way indicate their agreement and approval with her initiation. Community rituals, open rituals, and retreat ceremonies are a particularly apt time and place to honor elders or other groups of people, all young mothers, all elders, children, and so on. A ritual could also be held to celebrate the graduations of members of the community, in addition to their grad ceremonies at school. Weddings or funerals could be performed as community open circles, particularly for prominent community members. So,